Alright, welcome to Lesson 5 in this series on how to draw realistically. So if you can, watch the first video in this series, which will go over the techniques in much greater detail than what I'll describe in this video. But this video has to do specifically with how to draw a common house cat. So watch that first video, get acclimated to some of the terminology, and you'll better be able to understand what I'm talking about when I go through some of the techniques that I went through to draw this cat. So let's get started. And you'll notice I've got the reference photo printed out at such a size where it's not going to be too difficult. And remember this first line here I'll get back to that later, but printed out the photo in such a size where it's not too small, it's not too big. And so you don't want it too small or too big, because then it's just going to be more challenging, obviously talking to the beginner here. But I've got it as close as possible to where I'm starting the drawing. And what I'm doing is I'm just moving my eyes back and forth. And because my eyes don't have to move as far because the reference photo is so close, you're liable to get a more accurate drawing when your reference photo is this close. So getting started here with that first line there, and what I'm doing is, as you can tell, I'm moving extremely slowly at first. So in the beginning of such a drawing, I'm going to move considerably slower than I would, say, in the middle or towards the end of the drawing, because I'm really wanting to get that foundation. I'm wanting to get those initial measurements and angles accurate, or as accurate as possible, because I'll end up using the drawing essentially as a second reference point for later measurements. So here's that first line I was talking about, represented by that red. So I've taken the time to try to get that angle and length right of that first line. And what I'm doing, as described in the first video of this series, is I'm imagining a perfect plus sign. So you've got the perfect vertical, perfect horizontal angle. And sometimes with a line like this that is very similar to one of those angles, I'll compare it, in this case to the horizontal angle, because you can tell it's very similar. But if you really do a comparison of that first line, the first mark, the first decision really of the drawing, that you can tell when you really compare it that it's close to that horizontal angle, but it's not exact. So, and my point being is that decisions like this are going to set the course for the drawing. It's going to be the foundation. Did you spend enough time to, tell if this first line is in fact perfectly horizontal, or if it needs to be at an angle? So here's another series of lines represented in blue and red on the left there in the reference photo, where you can tell that if you got these lines here, and they're similar, but they're not exact. There's a difference there. The blue line is a little bit longer than the red line, and you really need to notice that in the reference photo, and then realize, is your drawing representing this accurately? Is what is represented by that red line significantly less in length than what is represented by that blue line? So continuing to flesh out the drawing using these techniques where I'm measuring in such a way where I can use the drawing itself to actually make sure I'm making accurate measurements. So here's a perfect example. You've got this red, blue, and then red in the reference photo there, where you can tell that what is represented by red is very similar in length. So you get this first line that, that angle and measurement of the eyeball is extremely similar to the width of the nose, so that you can actually, in your drawing, use your own drawing as a reference point. Sounds interesting, sounds strange, but using that measurement of that eyeball to ensure that the measurement of the nose is correct. So obviously you're moving your eyes back and forth between your drawing and the reference photo, but you're also going to move your eyes back and forth between that eyeball and the width of the nose. Knowing that it's that way in the reference photo, you're trying to make sure that it is as well that way within your drawing. So it's a great way of having yet another reference to be able to make sure you're drawing as accurately as humanly possible. And then when you think about it, your eyes not having to move back and forth nearly as far within your own drawing. So it's an even closer reference point, like the concept of if your eye doesn't have to move as far, your drawing is going to be potentially more accurate. Well, there's nothing more close than your own drawing. So something to practice where you're using your own drawing as a major reference point. But obviously your reference photo is your first reference point. So we've got this little area here of the eyeball where it's really the only subtle detail area of the reference photo, but it's a really good one because you can get a lot of depth into that eyeball. There's essentially a grayscale there. So this is an area where you potentially want to spend a little bit more time in getting that accurate, because that is really, at least it's where my eye is drawn, is to that eyeball where there's a little bit of shadow. It gives it a lot of depth, and there's a lot of curvature to that eyeball. So spending a little bit more time in an area where there is that detail, there is the potential to flesh that out and really make it into something interesting is a good idea. So fleshing out the drawing, you can tell I'm going beyond what the reference photo is even suggesting. So this is something that this reference photo really lends itself to that. As you can see by the red arrow, I've gone beyond what the reference photo is presenting, I guess. And this is just a great way to make the drawing your own. And like I say, the reference photo of the cat kind of lends itself to this, where you've got this fur, and you can kind of make it branch out and go beyond what the reference photo is allowing you to see. So just spending time trying to get some more detail in there, and you'll notice with the eyes in the reference photo that they're essentially the same, but the eyeball on the right there, his left, is a little bit darker. So again, it's like that first line or the measurement decisions. It's decisions like this where you move your eyes back and forth that will either make or break your drawing, or at least improve your drawing. So there you have it. 5th lesson in this series. Be sure to watch the first lesson that will go over the techniques in much greater detail, and hopefully there will be a lesson in the future. Thanks for watching.